Roll. I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Hartford Selectboard on Tuesday, November 12th, 2024 at 6 p.m. Our first item is the Pledge of Allegiance. Would anyone like to lead us tonight?
Be happy to.
Thank you, Lynn.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Lynn. All right, we have no liquor control board business and no cannabis control board business. Order of agenda. I note no changes, so we will go.
Mr. Chair,
Yep,
I would like to suggest that we move letter item 5F up to the front of the agenda. I know there's a lot of people that have made comments about how we're going to deal with this situation. Also, in terms of transparency and accountability, following the events of the school board, I think it'd be wise for us to address this when more people are going to be available and are online watching. It shouldn't take us too long to get through this item.
Thoughts from the board on this?
My only thought is if we change the time that's been published, people might not tune in till later, anticipating it being at the end of the agenda, and then would miss it, which like it's been warned for later. I don't have any objection to.
I think it sends a message that we're concerned about this, that we care about this, and that we are going to proceed in a professional manner going forward. That's why I suggest that we move it towards the front of the agenda.
Any other thoughts on it, Ken?
I mean, I don't think that we prioritize agendas by most important things first. I think that what tends to be a consideration is what requires staff to stay in the room for, or things that involve any personnel beyond select, like we're going to be here anyway. But if we, anyway, so it's not about priority of importance, the way that the agenda is structured typically. I appreciate the message, the symbolic message.
My statement.
I'd like to at least hear from the staff who have to be there first for the budget presentation. So if you wanted to put it for item B, I'd be okay with it.
It won't take that long to get through it. So,
well, and it's important enough that it is on our agenda that's been warned. So if people have no objection, why don't we put it to where B is?
But then we're going to have public work staff and IT staff staying later.
True. Any thoughts either way? Otherwise, leave it where it is.
I agree that with Lenny that it's an important thing, and we should showcase its importance. I'm agnostic as to moving it because I know that some folks do, like Kim said, watch the time. So I'm not sure how best to do it.
Been nice to heard this suggestion.
And we should showcase its importance. I'm agnostic as to moving it because I know that
huge harm, because I don't know that it's something that we're necessarily like soliciting a lot of public comment on. I know that people will probably be interested in to listen to the discussion. So one option would be to move it earlier, and then when we get to around the time 8:40 to sort of make a note if anyone, this agenda item was moved earlier, you can refer to the recording or the notes at the time that it was discussed if you want to hear the discussion.
I think in order just to move forward tonight, why don't we just put it after the budget presentations?
We're not making a motion on this. This doesn't have no warning for a motion. So as I just said, it's just something for discussion. So, and I appreciate your support, Brandon, on that. So I think it is important to bring it forward to the meeting. So I will acquiesce, and if we could bring it forward to that point in the process, I would appreciate that.
Okay, is that all right with people? Since we've got two people here to do budgets, we can hear from them and then we can take this up. It shouldn't take long. We're literally just looking at our options. All right, so we will move that up. We will now go to public comment. We'll start with people in the room, then hear from people who are online. If you'd like to comment, please come up to the microphone and state your name and town or village of residence. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. There's a timer. When it goes off, maybe if you can put that up, please wrap up your remarks. If you want to comment on like a later agenda item, we appreciate you waited until that point to comment. We ask that you not make any personal attacks and you address the select board as a whole. So I'll start in the room. Any public comment? Seeing none. Online, Zoom, any comment?
There are no hands up at the moment.
Okay, we will close public comment and move to select board comments and announcements. Kim? Anything?
I would just like to take this opportunity to remind folks that town meeting is in March and that this is a great time to become more civically engaged to anyone inclined and anyone interested in running for this board. There will be 4 seats for election or re-election on March 4th, and petitions for candidates are due to the town clerk's office in mid-January. So please consider this board, school board, committees, commissions, if there are any ways you'd like to be interested. And then just one more quick thing. There's a program through the Treasurer's Office in the state of Vermont called Vermont Saves, which is launching. There's a pilot program right now, but it's officially launching in December. It's called Vermont Saves, and it's a program for which folks who are not eligible in their workplace to receive to establish a retirement fund can do so through the state. It's a fascinating program. I won't take more time to discuss it now, but happy to answer any questions directly, but the website is vtsaves.vermont.gov, and I encourage employees and employers who aren't currently have a retirement program to check it out.
Ms. Kim, Brandon?
Yes, well, I feel like the election struck a lot of people pretty hard around here. I know we're mostly Democratic voters. So I decided to take the opportunity to borrow a friend's scarf, and this scarf is a special one. It represents sort of Palestinian independence, if you will, sort of the right to be a Palestinian in the world and to live in your indigenous land. So it's called a keffiyeh. I may not have pronounced it right, but yeah, but you know, anyone, you know, I think the being local is sort of being international in the sense that, like, I think we should have solidarity with oppressed peoples all over the world, and anyone interested in kind of getting together and brainstorming what we might care to do together to influence this situation of what's going on over there, feel free to reach out. My personal email address is hey@brandonsmith.com.
Brandon, Mary, any public comments? Okay, I didn't.
Yeah, I did want to highlight a local topic that's of interest to me, which was on the listserv Monday, November 4th. One of my colleagues at the VA put out an announcement that the VA is really in need of volunteers. And I just know that, you know, from my work on the select board, I've really seen the wonderful supportive community we have of people in Hartford that really care about veterans. That was demonstrated at the event for the monument dedication. That was just well attended and like a lot of passionate people. So I mean, it's just, through my day job, I've become aware that really since the pandemic, there's been a huge drop off in just people volunteering at our local VA, which is right here in White River Junction. The types of jobs that they need people to help out with are transportation, a parking lot shuttle to help people get to the main entrance, volunteer escorts, which delivers patients and people sort of throughout the facility, kitchen aids, clerical aids, DAV drivers, which actually pick up people and bring them to the facility for their appointments. So, you know, it's a pretty, you sort of have to go through a process of, it includes a background check. It's not just you can show up and help out. There's a very formal process for volunteers of the VA, but if you have time and you're interested and willing, I really encourage you to reach out to those folks. And I'll give the phone number and email here, but you can always reach out to me, or John can connect you with me if you want to know how to get in touch. But the phone number is 802-296-5190. And an email address is Stacy, STACEY WRIGHT /Hodge HODGE @va.gov. Thank you.
Thank you, Ida. Lynn?
Yeah, yesterday I had the honor of attending Veterans Day ceremonies here in the town of Hartford. We had a ceremony starting at the Hartford Cemetery and then proceeding down to Veterans Park. Well, in front of the municipal building, I should say, and then the Veterans Park and then the bridge. And just like to say it was an honor to be able to stand there and show my support towards my fellow veterans. That's what Veterans Day is all about. For those among us who are living, who have served and who are still serving. And it's an honor to be one of those veterans myself. Proud to serve this country. And just a big thanks for all those out there that are veterans and appreciate your service to our country. Thank you.
Thank you, Lanny. I don't have any select board comments, so we'll move on to our next item, which is the reappointment of Clare Forseth to the Hartford Tree Board for a 3-year term beginning November 12th, 2024 and ending November 11th, 2027. Any discussion or comments amongst the board? Otherwise, I'll take a motion. Eric?
I move that the select board reappoint Clare Forseth to the Hartford Tree Board for a 3-year term beginning November 12th, 2024 and ending November 11th, 2027.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
A second from Kim. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Our next appointment is to consider the reappointment of Stephanie Gile to the Hartford Zoning Board for a 3-year term beginning November 12th, 2024, ending November 11th, 2027. Any comments, questions? Is that me?
Yeah, Stephanie, can you step up the mic for a second, please?
If you'd like to, this is a reappointment.
Well, I have questions that I'm sure others would like to have answers to. So one of the concerns I will, full disclosure, I'm the liaison for the zoning board. So Hartford in today's age is facing a considerable amount of what I would classify as quality of life issues. We're beginning to see a larger increase of homelessness and a larger increase of, I want to say, drug paraphernalia in the town of Hartford. And I'm just curious where you see your role as a zoning board member in addressing quality of life issues that come before Hartford. And if you have a role in that, or if you feel the zoning board should be involved in addressing those concerns.
Sure, I'd be happy to talk on that. So I've
Stephanie,
been,
could you just introduce yourself for the record?
yeah, sure. My name is Stephanie Gile. I've been on the zoning board for the past 3 years. I think that the zoning board has a very limited role in that. I feel like my job is to look at the zoning bylaws that other parts of the town government have enacted, you all in the planning commission, and to look at the facts and just see how they fit with the bylaws that are on the books. And so I'm just trying to be a fair and impartial reader of whether the project complies with the bylaws. And I think that it's important sometimes to set aside real strong feelings one way or another, because sometimes that can get in the way of interpreting the facts and how the facts fit the bylaws. So I like to think of myself as somebody who is a strong believer in the rule of law, and to make sure that my job is to do the best that I can to enact the bylaws that were written by others.
Thank you.
Other questions for Stephanie?
Just an appreciation for your experience and your service so far, and thanks for signing back up again.
Yeah, I think there have been some challenging projects, and I don't mean to diminish
people's strong feelings that have come in front of the zoning board and expressed those feelings. But you know, it's been a positive experience. I've enjoyed working with the other board members as well, and having respectful conversation and discourse, so it's been a pleasure.
Mary?
I just want to reiterate what Kim said and also thank you for coming. A lot of reappointments. And they don't have to come, but it is nice to be able to see you and talk with you.
Sure. Well, in case there were any questions, I wanted to be available.
Any other questions or comments? Otherwise, I'll take a motion. Manny?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to reappoint Stephanie Gile, Hartford Zoning Board for a period of 3 years or 3-year term beginning November 12th, 2024 and ending November 11th, 2027.
All right, we have a motion. We have a second.
I'll second the motion.
Second by Mary. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Thank you
Thanks
very
very much,
much.
Stephanie.
Thank you.
All right, John, town manager's report. I'm gonna turn it over to you, John.
Thanks very much. As you know, the Fairview Terrace and Gate Street bond proposal was put to the voters on November 5th, and it met with success, achieving a 61 to 39% voting rate. So town staff is moving forward. We have notified the design engineer, the Vermont Bond Bank, and legal counsel. I met today with DPW staff to map out our next steps in the process, and we will keep you posted on important developments and a timetable. As Scott Cooney's own SIGAX makes clear, we have settled on a very strong community nurse candidate. And once that candidate emerges from background and health checks, we will make an announcement. So stay tuned. We're very excited about that. Many people in the community might have expected that by now we would be having further public input on Bridge 73 and its scoping study, but we've learned from VTrans that due to budgetary reasons, they've moved that whole process back to 2031. So we will not be having any kind of public input in the near future, but stay tuned as that
Excuse me, John.
approaches.
Can you just tell people what Bridge 73 is?
Yes, it's a good question. I used to know the name of it.
The one by the Bugby Center,
The one at the Bugby Center.
Route 5.
Thank you.
Is it called the Urban
Urban
Bridge?
Bridge.
Yeah.
Never called it.
Just give people an idea. It's
Yes.
between the Bugby Center and Route 514 4 intersection. So,
Thank you all for chipping in on confirmation of that.
I mean, Bridge 73 doesn't mean much to
No,
some
I
people.
get it. I get it. Thanks. From the communications and media specialist, we've heard that they have disseminated information regarding the new crime data analyst position, leading to media inquiries. There was messaging generated for the digital town sign in front of town hall, and he helped facilitate multiple news media interview requests regarding the election. I was the not so thrilled participant in 3 different interviews in one form or another. Department of Public Works is coordinating with VTrans on lighting for the new VA cutoff bridge. Obviously, there are quite a lot of folks who have expressed concern about the brightness of the current setting, and we think it can be dimmed appreciably, and we're going to have a DPW and VTrans meeting shortly to discuss that. And they seem quite amenable to doing so. The Hartford Police Department reports that the data and crime analyst, Wunderlich, who recently began work, attended the Rutland City Police Department Rutstat data sharing meeting on Tuesday of last week. She will be training with their data and crime analyst this month. And Chief Sheldon points out that HPD hopes to have a Hartford Police Department's first community data sharing meeting in January or February of this coming year, modeled largely at the Rutstat process in Rutland. Fire Department has pointed out that due to significantly dry conditions, there has been an open burning ban statewide. which I think was recently extended several days until at least beyond November 11th. The department has responded to mutual aid brush fires in the area and has responded to several fires around the community to inform the public of the current situation. Open burning in Hartford requires a burn permit. Burn permits can be found on the town website. The town department of the fire department, I should say, has responded to 2 encampment fires in town in the last week. One occurred on Hartford Avenue behind the cemetery, and the other occurred under the urban bridge. Both fires were suspicious and are being investigated by the fire marshal. The 2006 fire engine refurbishment is completed. Staff will be picking up the engine tomorrow. According to Chief Cooney, this refurbishment was made possible through the use of ARPA funds and should provide an additional 10 years of service to that vehicle. Finally, the Environmental Sustainability Coordinator reports that the Nature Conservancy's Community Resilience Building Community meeting will take place on Thursday, December 5 at the Wilder Club Library. The community meeting will focus on identifying Hartford's strengths, vulnerabilities, and opportunities in the face of climate change and other environmental issues.
Questions for John? Okay.
John, can you give me an update on the water situation out to West Hartford Library?
I don't have an update for you today, I'm sorry to say.
Can you get that?
I can
And
certainly do that.
Please
I know
email
that-
it to the
I
board.
know that as a follow-up to the last discussion, Scott and Dana were moving forward with plans. Let me seek updates from them and forward them to the board.
Yeah, please. Appreciate that.
I know I should remember this, but what's the anticipated time frame that we'll get that next assessment for the transfer station? Just the feasibility.
I don't know that, but I know that either Brian or Chris will be here tonight. I presume Brian will be available one way or the other. He can probably give us an update. I do think that they're winding down that process. Don't have a specific date for you.
Thanks.
Other questions for John?
I would just add that we got really excellent suggestion by email to publicize the current accessibility of curbside pickup.
Yes, I saw that
That,
today.
you know, whatever the fate of it may be, it makes a lot of sense.
For
to-
sure.
Since we are paying for it.
As to what's happening now, and we will certainly be discussing this topic in numerous sessions going forward. Discussing it later tonight, in fact. And JD is already talking with Dana of Environmental Sustainability and DPW in terms of getting some messaging out there.
Anything else, John? All right, thanks, John. Sure. Okay. Budget presentations. We're gonna have 2 tonight from the assessor and the town clerk.
Before we start with this thing though,
Okay.
yep, John, you can go ask that, Rick. One of the things that I'm very much I'm a visual learner. And it would be nice if we could have these PowerPoint presentations available ahead of time so that we could look through them from the department heads, because a lot of the questions that I have come from the PowerPoints, not so much from the
So
actual.
you
budget.
don't mean just in advance of the meeting, but in advance of the deadline for questions?
Correct, because I gain a lot from a PowerPoint presentation. I'll still ask questions, but there's much more to be gleaned from PowerPoint versus just what's in the book. Thank you.
All right, so we've got Rick, our assessor here. Rick, I will let you run through your presentation. We could maybe keep our questions to the end of the presentation. It probably makes it more efficient. So, whenever you're ready.
All right, thank you. It's Rick Vincent, the town assessor. So we'll start with the big number first, the bottom line for the department. The proposed budget for next fiscal year is $307,008. It's an increase of $16,131 from
Wait, I'm sorry, Rick, I'm still on the narrative page. You want me to go down to the salaries page here?
Yep.
Okay.
Sorry.
Like, so this is where you would like.
There
me
you
to
go. Yep.
Okay.
So that's an increase of $16,131 or a 5.5% increase. Salaries, of course, went up $6,200 and some odd dollars. Benefits went down by almost $9,000. And that's primarily a result of a two-person plan going to one person. Retirees, there are currently 2 retirees, former assessors, that are getting retirement benefits. So those went down $413. And then the current retirement plan went up by $1,375. We can skip to the next screen. So this is the wage breakdown. $155,813 up to $162,089 to full-time employees. And that's the non-union wage increase of 4%. Next screen. And this is the benefits for the 2 employees in the department. And this shows the reduction in cost by $8,997. Next one. Now, fortunately, not all lines went up. I was able to keep the travel and meetings, membership dues. I think there might have been a few other individual lines that were level funded. Recruitment and training, I increased that by $1,100 in anticipation of some classes coming up that the assistant assessor hopes to take. Now, I really want to provide her with all the courses that she can take, and there should be some coming up next year. So I want to have enough funds for her to take those classes. Contracted services. You'll see there's a sharp increase in the cost for contracted services, an increase of $12,400. And that's primarily a one-time increase. And we have an issue right now with our online assessing vendor of Beacon that provides all the online assessing data. So we're currently dealing with 3 different vendors to get that information online. There's Schneider that has the Beacon website, Vision, which is our CAMA system, the assessing system provider, and CAI, which is our mapping company. And in order to get all that information that you see on the Beacon site, we have to get information from CAI, these mapping information, shape files that have to be loaded into that Beacon site, and then assessing databases that have to be loaded into that website as well. And the 3 of them don't always talk well with each other. So every year it's a struggle to get that information online properly and working properly. So CAI, which is the mapping vendor, they also provide online databases. So my plan is to replace Beacon with CAI. Now we'll only be dealing with 2 vendors, and they both work well together because they've been dealing with each other for many, many years. So they can work well with each other. The 2 systems speak well with each other. They get along. So the plan is to eliminate Beacon, bring in CAI. There's a one-time setup fee of $6,200 for CAI to get everything set up. Based on the current annual maintenance fees, CAI is actually $400 cheaper than Beacon. So in the long run, we'll save money, but it's that one-time setup fee that we have to incur to get this to work. The biggest issue with this changeover is having to deal only with 2 vendors instead of 3, and having to go through this process every year of getting those shape files for the maps working properly on the website. I think that's it. And I'll take the questions.
Questions, for Rick? Elaine?
Yeah, Rick, you stated that it was a $6,200 setup fee for the CAI, but you got listed 3,900 in the budget book.
No, it's 10,200 minus 4,400 from last year.
I see 3,900 next to CIM mapping,
Yeah, let me
and then 3,000
check that.
CAI mapping. So I'm trying to understand
Yep,
where the 62 comes from.
Look at column 4.
Narrative for column 4. Right, still 3,000 though.
But then
Sure.
the second line is the 10,200, which is 6,200 more than the 4,400 from column 3. Right?
I'm sorry, what's that?
Sorry, I'm interjecting.
Good.
My apologies.
I did have the answer for that. I
Okay,
knew every one of these lines. I believe the rest of the increase is due to annual maintenance fees, increases in annual maintenance fees from all the different vendors.
but where's the 6,200 versus the,
So if you look at the second line, this might be what Kim was talking about, in the budget presentation itself. This is on page 16. Under 10,174,318. No,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, yeah, under 10,174,318, the second narrative, it says CAI web hosting, $10,200.
right?
The $6,200 is included in that figure.
Okay, that's,
So the normal annual web hosting fee for that would be $4,000.
all right, that answers that question. Then. Thank you.
Other questions for Rick?
Do you, does that also include like migrating all the, like getting it set up, or is staff going to have to data?
Well, there's really no migrating, it's just a fresh start. Once CAI takes it, it's a fresh start, but we have to set everything up. But it's not migrating anything from Beacon over to CAI. It'll be a fresh import for CAI.
Okay, but it's not like gonna be hours and hours of staff time
No.
inputting data for the new system.
Right.
Thanks.
Rick, is there going to be a time that people won't have access to Beacon?
It shouldn't be. The plan is to switch over on July 1st.
Okay,
So the contract with Beacon ends on June 30th or 31st, whatever the last day is in June. So the plan is to work with CAI to have that ready so that they just turn the switch and turn it on July 1st.
and where will a link be provided for that new CAI
It'll
website?
be on the town website.
Okay, because I mean, everybody right now just types in Beacon and they can navigate to tax maps.
More questions for Rick? Ready?
Thank you. I was just wondering, as kind of a public education question, like, I think it would be good to hear what you folks, the assessors, do during the years where there's not a reassessment. Kind of, or perhaps a better directed question would be, what's most of your time spent on when there's not a reassessment going on, and like maybe what's the second most time consuming thing that you folks do?
So you're looking for an answer to that now, or?
Yeah, if you have one on top of mind.
Okay. So in a revaluation year, we're handling the revaluation on top of our normal duties. In a non-revaluation year, the first few months of the year are spent going out inspecting properties that have permits. So we get all the changes. So if there was a permit for a deck, we go out, find the deck, see if it was done, measure the deck. If there was a house built, we go out, measure the house, get all the information on the house. So that's the first 6 months of the year, is gathering that information, sending out notices, getting the grant list for the abstract done. That's the first 6 months of the year. The last 6 months is doing different studies, answering questions from taxpayers, running sales reports, reporting sales and other information to the state. That's the general overview.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Rick.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, John, can I ask a question to you? This is not a Rick question, so you and I guess it'd be maybe the finance director. Can you give us what the increase was townwide for medical and dental for this year?
I can't speak to dental, but I know that the health insurance increase was roughly 11%.
Okay, that helps to figure out what's going on. Okay.
I think it's included in your overview that
Right.
you provided for the budget.
Right.
Okay.
I was gonna say, I read somewhere that the dental was 3%, 11% for health. and
Thanks for that
3%
reminder.
for dental.
All right. Thanks again, Rick. Thanks, Kim, for.
No, sure.
And now we have our town clerk, Lisa.
Everybody.
Whenever you're ready.
Kim, do you want to bring me over as a presenter? And I
Oh,
can- Or
yes.
would you prefer to do that?
No.
I'm happy to share. if I
Yeah.
can.
So it's harder for me to look at my own computer.
Well,
when I'm-
that's what I wondered if.
So I just invited you to be a panelist. It should come up on your screen.
Anyone who knows me knows this is not my strong suit, so thanks for your patience. First of all, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank everyone for a smooth sailing during our election, and that includes the voters for Hartford, our wonderful BCA, the chair happens to be here today. The many community volunteers who helped staff the election, the clerk staff who worked enormous hours, and the town staff who just was always checking on us to make sure we were okay. So a huge shout out to all of those folks for all that you did during the last 6 weeks in particular. This is our town clerk's budget. Every year I come before you, we have the 2 budgets. It starts with the election. For those who don't know what the clerk's office does, we do a lot of different things. Election is one that you're probably most familiar with. We also do all the land record and vital records recording. We do everything from notarizing to DMV renewals, marriage licenses, dog licenses, cannabis licenses, liquor licenses. I'm sure I've forgotten something in there, but it's a fairly active place and it's very forward facing to our community members. And we spend a lot of time assisting the community and our coworkers here and working with the state and any other stakeholders we might have. This is an overview of the election administration budget. The salaries include the Board of Civil Authority and election worker compensation and any BCA compensation related to abatements, tax appeal hearings, biannual checklist review, which will be coming up this year, well, 2025, and any other meetings we might have. For advertising, we advertise the positions to be elected for the town and the school district. And we also do a promotion regarding the availability of early and absentee voting. So we send out a postcard ever since the pandemic, just to remind people they have that option. We don't mail ballots to everyone for our local elections, but they certainly have the option to request one. Contracted services is primarily for the voting tabulator to have that programmed. And then materials and supply, basic election supplies, food for our BCA, and then the printing of the ballots and the postcard I just referenced. Not much changes in this particular portion of our budget. You'll see the actual salary section goes up and down a little bit depending on the year. In even years, we do more elections. In odd years, we do, if we're lucky, just the town and school meeting election. But as you all noted, last year we ran a second election, and in 2021, I believe we ran a special town election to elect 2 seats for the select board when 2 vacancies were left, which was what was required during through the charter, that we had to host a special election for that. Advertising will go up a little bit this year. I think I underestimated how much it was going to be in the past, and we've used encumbered funds in the past. Contracted services, I'm not anticipating any particular change. Materials and supplies will go down again a little bit, simply because if we're lucky, we'll just have the 1 election. And then not last year, we or in FY25, we put in funds for a laptop, and I'm not anticipating needing to do that again in FY26. A few highlights from the elections. I anticipate that we will have a greater number of tax appeals next year, which the Board of Civil Authority oversees. Historically, anytime there's a townwide reassessment, there's a significant number of tax appeals. Last year, we didn't have any. And then other years, we've had anywhere from 8 to 10 to 12, but I looked back, and in 2017, I don't know what the total number was, but it was significant. So it'll take a lot of the BCA time. As I said, we had 4 elections this year, had 1 in our regular in March, school special election in April, then we had the statewide primary in August, quickly followed by what happened last week on November 5th. Anybody who hasn't had a chance to see the results that we pushed out, the link is on this slide. It's on the town website. You're welcome to peruse those. And if you have any questions, feel free to call the clerk's office. The other thing we're experiencing over the last few years is a greater number of requests for tax abatements, including an increase in the number of water and sewer requests, which we hadn't seen much of prior to the pandemic. And now we're seeing more of those, which requires a greater number of meetings per year. When I first started here, it was 1 to 2 meetings a year, and now we're up to 3 to 4 meetings per year. And the number of hearings within those meetings has increased. So that impacts certainly the salaries of the BCA or the payment for the BCA. This next slide, what the packet that you all have, it said in 2026. I corrected it today. It should say in FY 2026. So in the summer of 2025, we'll be doing our biennial checklist review. That's when the BCA comes together and literally reads every single name on the checklist, which is over 9,000 names. And we compare notes about whether we know the status of that voter in terms of whether they continue to reside in the town or not. The BCA authorizes the clerks to do regular monitoring of death notices, property transfer records, and return mail and things like that. So we do try and keep up with our list to the best that we can, but we cannot automatically purge someone unless they meet certain criteria. And if people were curious, as of November 3rd, just before our election, we had 9,681 registered voters. Of that number, 1,500 roughly are challenged. And so we continuously manage our list for that purpose. I'm happy to take questions for this portion, or as the chair mentioned, you may all want to ask questions completely
I
at
think
the end.
it's appropriate to have any questions for this portion. Lan?
Lisa, I know it was a while back, but can you give us what you believe would a ballpark figure to put on a special election for town in school if we were to have to do that?
Well, the school reimbursed us for last year because we're in this year in April. So
Right.
the state reimbursed them because of the change in the legislation and the timing and all of that. So we submitted everything to the school. On average, a local election costs between $8,000 and $12,000. So say $10,000 on average. That's everything from staffing it to ballots to postage for mailing for the tabulator. So that's a good ballpark number. A special election might be a little bit less. You may not get as many absentees, but for the April election for the school, the state recommended that we mail ballots to everyone who had requested one for the March election. So that may just be a good protocol since we do a lot more absentees for our local election. Than we have in the past.
And where in your budget, I'm sure it's in a reserve fund somewhere, the funding for something like that, if it should happen?
It's not in a reserve fund. I build it into my budget.
Okay, so there's
So hopefully there's plenty in there to cover any, in the event of a special election.
okay, thank you.
And that's why I said it doesn't change all that much because I do
So that means there's some encumbered funds at the end of the year.
potentially, but only if we encumber them. I mean, another department may need them or in speaking with Gile, we would decide where I am in our budget when you get to that encumbered portion. And we have a discussion both with the finance director and the town manager about whether we have needs for encumbered funds or whether we're falling short in another portion of our department where we need to shift funds. Correct me if I'm wrong, Gile.
Okay, thank you.
Questions for Lisa? No?
Just a quick question, because I've been on tabulator several times. How long will the tabulator machines be, I don't know how to put it, available for use without having to buy a whole new one?
The state provides the tabulator, so
Okay.
the town isn't paying for those.
Okay.
I
But you
don't-
do maintenance?
I'm sorry.
You do maintenance?
I don't do maintenance. They are on a regular schedule to come clean them, service them. They have us every roughly 2 to 3 months, charge them just to keep them ready to go. But we don't pay for that. We pay to have them programmed for our local elections. The state pays to have them programmed for any statewide elections. Nancy may know, not to put you on the spot, but since you're here, she may know how long the previous tabulators were in service. I don't know. We've had these now for 2 years, I believe. And I'm not sure how long the old ones were. Do you have any sense?
No, well longer than 2 or 3 years. Certainly more than 5 years. Thank you.
Any questions for Lisa on this portion of her budgets? Yeah,
Moving right along.
Yeah.
Vital statistics. The most significant thing here is last year for FY '25, we proposed the addition of a part-time assistant clerk, which has been wonderful. But one thing that I've realized is that to build the depth, which was the purpose of hiring an additional clerk, was to build depth within our office. And for that position to be able to do everything the 2 full-time clerks do. I think that turned out to be a fairly impractical, understanding for me, because what it has allowed for, which again has been wonderful, it's been allowed for the basic day-to-day, people come to the window, people call on the phone. That's really not the intent. The intent was to have someone who could do everything that the 2 full-time clerks do. So the more involved processes that we do every day, liquor licenses, cannabis licenses, even the land record recording, although our current part-time person does know how to do that, there's no continuity in a part-time role to really establish these more involved tasks that we do, including elections. So this position has provided some relief to me with elections, but if I were to get hit by a bus tomorrow, no one in our office is ready to take over all of the components of the election. There just isn't time to get someone who's working 20 hours a week to be able to do all of these things. There are many things that you'll see, those of you who've been on this board for a while, will see some of the same goals of things we hope to accomplish. And there just isn't time for those things to happen because everything else takes precedent over things, including, we hope to get an online land records thing. That's a really involved process. And we get started every year. There just isn't time to close that loop because there's no one else to do the pieces I do. No one else does the abatement preparation. No one else does the tax appeals preparation. All of those things are things that a third clerk could do. And we're scrambling with what we have now. So what it highlighted to me was half-time was really not what we needed. It was really full-time. So I am proposing that that position be expanded to be a full-time position, which would make it a full-time clerk, 2 full-time assistant clerks. So basically 3 full-time folks. Travel and meetings, obviously, we will get to those things, advertising. So I've highlighted the primary things. So I'll scoot to that. As you know, I do tend to go on a little bit. The salaries, it's lumped together with all of the benefits and the salaries. So that includes the maximum in terms of the benefits based on our current configuration and potential configuration, just to be clear about what that looks like. So there is an increase there. Other departments or other sections stay roughly the same. There's very little differential along the way. In terms of contracted services, these are things that we do for our copier leases and things along those lines. So there's some changes due to inflation. Postage is forever changing. Materials and supplies stays roughly the same. Again, I'm anticipating just inflationary changes. This year I put, after talking with Dylan, put the net in with telephone. So that I think had been with contracted services previously. And department equipment, not anticipating too much for that. And then retirees went down a little bit. So you can see that we do generate revenue in our office as well. So about 1/3 of our overall budget for vital statistics is offset by generating revenue within our office. And our total budget for the clerk's office in general, compared to the general fund, I believe we come up to 0.01% of the total town's general fund budget. So not to make light of what we have here, we're a pretty tiny portion of it, but the need is fairly great in terms of those things. I did talk a little bit about, we're still trying to do various things in terms of getting a vendor for online land records. I've started every year since I've been here, it'll be 7 years in February, an office specific procedure manual. I get going for 2 or 3 days and then everything else takes over. But as I said earlier, if something happened to the 2 people with some knowledge in that well-rounded knowledge in the office, there isn't a manual. Someone recently asked me, do we have a succession plan? The plan is to try and get a procedural manual going, but other things take precedent. So I've learned a lot in having our part-time person in that this is really a 3-person job. We also have on the horizon being able to transfer our vital records, death and birth. Now the state has a system since 2019 where all the vital records are held there. So we don't keep vital records anymore, but anything prior to that period, Vermont State Archives will house those for us. And I made a pretty good start on what the plan was, but it's very specific about how you have to box them all up and they all have to have codes. And again, it's just another project that I can't close the loop on, but that would free up a lot of space in our vault, which we could desperately use. I already talked about expanding the clerk's position, and we will be coming to you, I think, sometime this fall. Sherry West, who does the most of our liquor licenses, has kind of reviewed the policy you all put in place some years ago with the change of the state portal and some other things. There are things that are out of sync with what we actually do now. So we want to review that with you. I just haven't had a chance to give it an in-depth thing, but John and I have been chatting, and I think we'll be on your agenda in the future to talk to you a little bit about that and just see how you'd like to proceed going forward. I did kind of skip around, so if you have questions, please let me know.
Questions for Lisa? Kim?
I have that thought about your well-being whenever we're in the process of any election, especially, but and I'm definitely supportive of the additional position. Two things. One, do you have space? I know you've been working with 3 people in your office.
This wouldn't be an addition. This would be an expansion of the existing part-time position. So in my mind, it would be 3 full-time clerks.
And I guess with the existing physical space that you have,
Currently, our physical space has 3 desks that we are utilizing,
and that's fine.
and it seems to be working. It took us a minute to get there, but we did get there eventually with, we had to add some outlets in the floor and things like that, but we did find a way to make the space work.
Have you, and I, not to add one more thing to your plate, but maybe even in the scope of going forward with 3 full-time positions, have you considered exploring the possibility of looking for an intern to do very specific projects, like maybe even to help like write that operations manual, or like if there are specific kind of finite projects, I could see like an intern being a valuable asset to tackling a project.
I think because our job is so specific about the things we do, unless you're actually doing it, I don't believe you could write the procedure manual with an intern.
Or a
And I-
different project, like back boxing up the stuff for the state
Yeah,
or whatever. and
That may be a possibility for something like that.
Maybe with more capacity within the department, you would have the bandwidth to seek, resources for
It's
having an
possible.
intern. I think like we've seen that work out really well in like Parks and Rec and stuff, so.
Open to many suggestions.
Questions for Lisa? Okay.
Yeah, Lisa, where am I not seeing training on this for your department? I would think that we're bringing on, did I miss that one?
I think it is in, hold on. Because most of the training we attend is the Vermont Municipal Clerks and Treasurers Association and VLCT trainings. And I think that's probably in, is there one that says travel and meetings? Hold on, let's get there. Thank you. Yeah, so I throw it all into travel and meetings. The only time I've had a recruitment and training line item was when we were anticipating advertising for the part-time position that we.
Okay, that's what I thought. I would have saw
Yep.
that under, but.
Yep,
okay,
so it's under travel and meetings, Lanny.
Okay,
Thank you.
gotcha.
Question. Brandon?
Just wondering, I am assuming, but wanted to ask anyway, that the full-time proposed position would be an expansion of the person who's already there, and that person is like ready and willing to work 40 instead of 20 hours.
To me, that's a personnel question, and I'm not comfortable answering that in an open meeting of the select board. I will tell you that the staff in the clerk's office is aware that I proposed this position, and I think I'll leave it at that. Because that's really personnel.
We can only talk about the
Question.
position, not that.
So you note that I talked position, and it has nothing to do with who's currently in the position or not in the position. It could be my position if something happened to me or anyone who's currently there. So
Good questions for Lisa? No, seeing none. Thank you very much.
thank you, guys.
We are moving up an item on our agenda, considering the options regarding the select board vacancy. So in our packet, some of the materials we have on that, start on page 54. John wrote up a nice sort of summary of what our options are, so I will just leave it to him to let us know where we stand and what we can do, and these are certainly topics for the board to consider.
Sure.
going
Jeez,
forward.
oh, sorry, is my screen still sharing with my picture up there? Nick?
We just want to see you in blue.
I can
Thank you.
report, Mike, that I reached out to the Vermont League of Cities and Towns and then subsequently to the town's own attorney. And we've had confirmed the fact that there seem to be several options available to the select board, given that Susan Buckholz has resigned her post, which is a 2-year term, roughly 2/3, 3/4 of the way through her first year of service. The one option would be to leave the seat vacant until a town meeting in March, at which time the voters can elect someone to serve out the remaining 1 year of the Buckholz term. Another option would be to try to solicit applications, interview candidates, and then make an appointment on an interim basis to a replacement for Sue Buckholz until town meeting. So that would be probably realistically, with the holidays and everything we're dealing with, someone willing to step up to serve maybe January and February, and then either finish out their service on town meeting day or seek re-election to the remainder of that 1 additional year term. And a third option, of course, is to call a special election sooner, which, as you've heard from the clerk, does involve some considerable expense and would have to be conducted once again, another election that is for the remaining 1 year in March for that seat. What we've gotten later today is kind of a summary of somewhat inconsistent charter language that Brian Monahan has seen in the town's charter, in which he points out that the first sentence of section 203A1E of the charter states that the select board, quote, may appoint a person eligible to fill the vacancy, which makes this appear to be an optional choice on the select board's part and not a mandatory act. However, he later points out that the second sentence states that if the select board is unable to agree on an interim replacement until the next annual meeting, unquote, which he states seems to imply that the select board must have at least considered the issue and then come up short of an actual agreement among the remaining members to go in that direction. So he says, putting these two sentences together, he thinks there's enough of an argument to be made that the charter considers the select board power to appoint to be a possible authority, but not a required action. He goes on to say that the second sentence is mandatory, but only in the sense that it envisions a board first considering whether to appoint temporarily someone and then going to that vote and then coming to a deadlock. So he certainly suggests that if and when the town revisits the charter, this inconsistent language should be addressed and dealt with. It's like several other areas of the charter that probably could bear some additional work in the future when the time comes. But suffice to say, those seem to be the options that are available to the board. Brian and I have discussed it, and both the VLCT input and Brian characterize this as, yes, a matter of interpretation of state and local ordinance, local charter provisions, but also really a political decision, because ultimately the decision of the select board will be scrutinized by the members of the public, and they're the ones who will hold the select board accountable for its decisions, rather than some sort of charter police that might haul us away in handcuffs. That's not going to happen.
Questions for John on this, or thoughts from select board members on the proposed course of action? Have the option, it looks like, so John, just to, that second provision is so strange. If we decide we want to fill the vacancy and we come up with a candidate and somehow that candidate does not get a majority of affirmative votes from the board, then we would have to go to a special election.
Right.
So, okay.
Oh.
Yeah, it seems strange, right? Like if we start the process and we either re-deadlock basically, then it has to go to the election. It has to go to special.
That seems to be how Brian is interpreting it, but he suggests that if the board simply opts not to try to fill the position, then that provision doesn't come into play.
Right.
And again, there are real logistical problems. Here we are, November 12th. I would argue that by the time you advertise for applications, take the time through a busy budget and holiday season to interview candidates and then make a decision, that you might easily find yourself in January with maybe a couple of months left of service until the town meeting time, when there would have to be an election.
And this may be a question for Lisa, but if we decided to call a special election, like ahead of the March election, I imagine that there would also be statutory timelines just for notice, you know, as well as getting ballots.
Certainly true.
Kim?
And would it then still be, so say we managed to pull up a special election in January, it would still only be until March, right? That person would still have to run again just for the second
For
year.
the
of
second full
term,
year, yeah.
Provided they wanted to.
if they wanted to, right? But anyway, so it's basically a lot of consideration for something that's potentially like a month or two service, because it's not even, it's the beginning of March. So anyway, I'd be curious to know if there is a lot of input. My inclination is to wait until March and have that seat be open for election.
Certainly there
But
could
it
be.
still would be for the rest of the 1 year of that
Yes,
term.
certainly there could be a use of this time in the interim to make people aware that there's this new additional opportunity to serve beyond the 3 other elections that are going to be taking place.
Ida? Nancy, if you have anything you want to add, you
I
can.
was just going to remind him who raised it, that not only is there the cost of the election, but there are specific timelines that you have to meet. You can't just call an election in 2 weeks and say that's okay.
Nancy, could you just identify yourself as can you identify yourself?
Oh, Nancy Howe.
Also chair of the Board of
chair
Civil.
BCA.
Ida?
Yeah, my inclination is the same as Kim's, that it's probably seems most rational and fair to both an interested person and to the voters to wait until March. I think, I think that would give us a lot of opportunity to continue to encourage folks to consider running for the select board, which I know is important to us all. I think it also would give the additional, enticement or motivation to say, if you are curious about the select board, there's an opportunity to run for a position that's only a 1 year commitment. And then you can decide if you want to rerun at that point. So yeah, I see a few benefits to going with the option to put it to the voters in March and leaving the seat vacant until then.
Danny?
There's a couple of schools of thought with this that I've had. I've had people approach me that say that if we do not fill the position, we still have the conundrum if someone were to resign from the board, that would force the election,
Yes,
force us to have an election.
yes.
All right, so that's one of the problems if we don't fill a position. And somebody decides to get done for personal reasons or such be it. All right. So that's one train of thought that would create a lot of additional work for our staff if we have to go that route, and also meeting all the timelines. That's the other train of thought that I had about this is that I don't think that it's fair to bring someone on board to the select board to have to go through this budgeting season that hasn't been paying attention to what's happening with the town and the departments. So it's not fair to that person, whoever we bring on board, unless they're a person that's been paying very close attention to the happenings and the goings on, such as a Heidi Duto or Maria Alvin or somebody of that nature. That's the problem that we face. But you also, like I say, you just have to be aware that, I mean, any one of us could have a family emergency or something that would require us to resign and force an election. So I personally am for the thought process of leaving unfilled, but if we do have a situation where we have somebody say, I can't continue my duties, we're in a bind.
Probably be a good time now to ask the remaining members if anybody has any such plans to resign. Sue's wasn't a family emergency, she just had enough. Or any of you others in that same situation?
Kim?
I am not, but I'm trying to search the adopted charter, and it is not OCR searchable, so please add that to the list. But I was trying to ascertain that there was a provision, and I'm not looking at it, so I'll find it momentarily, but I thought there was a provision that if the vacancy, even if it were two within 6 months of a scheduled election, that we didn't have to.
No,
Does that ring any bells?
there's no provision for that within the town charter.
Okay.
We are
I
forced
must
to
be thinking
have-
of something else, but
You're
I'll,
forced to have it. I know the charter very well. We're forced to have a special election if there should be another person that resigns. Again, granted, if somebody were to get done in, say, February, okay, I'm sure there's wiggle room in everything, okay, but our charter specifically states that upon 2 members of the board being absent, you are required to have a special election. I mean, we would not be able to meet the statutory requirements, within the time frame if we were to have that brought upon us in even February, and I'm not sure January. So if we're going to do something to try to fill a seat, it has to happen now.
Brandon?
I just wanted to put it out there that given the facts in front of me, I would be comfortable leaving it unfilled and like crossing that bridge if we came to it. In large part because to pass something on the board as it is now, we still need 4 votes, which is the same as it has always been. So I know that would be kind of an emergency situation, and we'd have to follow the law with election notices, but I don't have plans to leave. So,
Mary?
I was just gonna say, I agree with Kim and Brandon, and I think Lanny and Ida. I think, you kind of can't operate out of what ifs. It's nice to know there's process, but I think that, I think it's best for us to move forward and keep the vacancy open until March. I think it's, it makes a lot of sense. And sure, anything can happen, but I think we have to go with what is probably the best law of averages.
I'm fine with that, but I also have to bring out the other possibilities of what could happen between now and March. I mean, that's something that we have to consider all the ramifications before this board. We just can't think on one level. And that's why I bring it out that we could be in trouble. So
Seems like there's general unanimity that our preference, given the time, given the hurdles, is to leave the seat vacant until the election in March. If there were more time, we were different time of year, you know, it might be different. In that case, I might advocate for a special election. I kind of find the process of us like vetting people and choosing and replacing to be kind of, it just doesn't really sit well with me. So I would also be inclined to leave this open until March. And then we'll have what, 4 seats up? Something like that?
Two-year, 3-year.
Yeah, so, and plus it also, it is a good point, and I think we've heard it from several board members in the last couple meetings, trying to make people aware that there are gonna be seats up for the board, and if they're interested, you know, to start thinking about that. I think this is just another way we can maybe increase public interest and awareness of that. So it seems like the board, we're okay with leaving this vacant. Other thoughts before we move on to the agenda?
Next election will be an excellent time to get on the board if you want to, with 4 seats
Yeah.
available.
See if there's
Plenty
any-
of seats out there.
Yeah.
All right, well, thanks everyone for your thoughts on this, and glad to see we're all basically on the same page. Okay, so we'll now go to the curbside recycling contract extension. We've got Brian from Public Works here. Brian, if you just wanna, we'll turn it over to you.
Take my glasses off. So if we go back to April of this year, we went into a 6-month extension with we need to take a look at going through the RFP process. In a nutshell, in 2016, when they went through the RFP process to get to the 2017 agreement that's currently in place, certain parameters were put in, how many units were going to be looked at, commercial, residential. It was all within the RFP. Since then, a lot of things have happened. There's been a lot of changes in how we pick things up, who's getting picked up, and a lot of it wasn't documented from either our end or from Casello's end. Case an example might be, there may be a condo unit in Queechee where they had 10 totes out there. Casello found it easier to just put a dumpster out there for convenience for their sake. So they didn't charge us for pickup, like per the agreement. But what they did then was that they did with another truck, they would pick it up with something that picks up a dumpster, but they didn't charge us for that service, but then we didn't get the revenue. What's called the average economy rate for that. These are all changes that happened. So going through this, I can't sit here and tell you today how things are picked up, how many places are being picked up. We did it, I did a count last December, and approximately there's about 1,800 within a 2-week period for the net cycle that's going on. So John and I met with Dave Allen, and then with the operations manager from the transfer station on Route 4. They're adamant in regards to they're moving forward with their fleet modernization, which is going to get away from a resident just putting recyclables out any way they want. It's going to have to go to a tote where the mechanical arm picks it up, dumps it into. If you get trash service with them now, like I have it, there's a white box in the front of the container, they dump it in there, and then they'll dump it in the truck from there. So we got them to agree to another 6-month extension, but they were very adamant that the current cost proposal doesn't work. So they gave us a proposal. John and I reviewed it. We had one thing that we didn't like with it, so they took it out in regards to sort of forcing our hand to go out with an RFP with that.
Kind of locking us into a future relationship,
With that.
which we weren't quite certain that we wanted to do.
So the thought is, the price is fairly extensive. When I did the budget last year, we anticipated a cost increase. I did my best to project out with a little spreadsheet of where we're at, taking a look at actual from where we're going to go. And with that, looking at approximately about a $27,000 shortfall in this year's budget for it. With that, though, I think there could be savings. We do have a part-time position that hasn't filled yet. Then I would anticipate we'll probably have hopefully enough money within the actual 30 fund to fund that shortfall. But once again, they're just projected costs with that. Thought is, let's move forward with another 6-month extension. It will give all of us time to really discuss, do you want to continue with curbside recycling? My thought would be going forward, So, I put 325,000 in the budget, just thinking increased costs, but I think we got indication it'll be a little bit more than that. But I can't give
As
you.
opposed to the 275 that it has been.
Correct, right. So, I think we just need to move forward with it right now. That's my recommendation. And then if you decide to continue the curbside recycling, my recommendation would be is we start from scratch. And we decide what we're going to pick up, residential, commercial, how we're going to do it, and put a brand new RFP out. That just, I can't utilize the old one and how things are done, so.
Questions for
Of
Brian?
course, I should point out, this is happening at the same time that we hope to be wrapping up shortly with Sanborn Heads, the facility feasibility study at the transfer station. And if we had this additional time, it might help us tee up decisions for the board in terms of fact sheet, similar to what we did with Fairview Terrace, really. A fact sheet of what's happening now with the program, what percentage of the population is paying for this service. That's 100%. What percentage is benefiting from this service? Probably something substantially less than 100% of the population. The cost associated with it, the likelihood of big increases in cost in the future. And maybe it's a select board decision, or maybe the select board wants to take the temperature at town meeting from the public about how they feel about this program. These are just some thoughts that are percolating in Brian in my head as we think of this as an extension to give us an additional time to tee up these decisions, and also to communicate thereafter, after town meeting. If there's going to be a change, it gives us 2 or 3 months to educate the public about their own options as an alternative to curbside recycling. So.
Okay.
John, I can't agree with you more about Sanborn Head at the transfer station. When I was reading this, that's the first thing that came to my mind, is that I think a priority for us is go ahead with the extension. We have to prioritize a decision on the transfer station, which will affect curbside recycling for us in the future. With that said, how far out are we on Sanborn Head? Because if we're only getting a 6-month extension from Casella, we need to get this thing wrapped up. We need the information provided to us by Sanborn Head, and we need to make a decision to go forward.
Kim asked about that earlier. Do we have a sense of when we're going to?
Well, we were actually waiting for tonight to see if this extension goes through, to see where we're going. From there, I'd anticipate holidays coming up, end of the year, early January.
But this extension is separate from Sanborn Head, though. Two separate entities, so
But they're part and parcel though, too, though,
I understand, and one relies on, the future of recycling relies on the future of the transfer station. I understand that, but it's imperative, like I say, for us to understand ahead of time, before the 6 month is up, where we're going. And also, if we're gonna, at the end of this 6 months, we should have something in place, an RFP put out there for other trash haulers that could possibly, do recycling in town of Hartford. There's a lot of independent haulers in the area. And just to say that Casella's, just because they're the biggest guy out there wielding the heaviest stick, doesn't mean they're the only guy in town. So we got to be able to have enough people contact us to know, the decisions or the different paths that we could travel down for recycling in town of Hartford. The other question I guess I had is, with Casella's new plans to go to this one truck picking up with a dedicated refuse container, who's going to purchase those containers? And are you allowed to have more than one container? I usually wait and let my recycling really stack up instead of doing it every other week. What's going to be the options for people? Are you going to?
One, we could have residents purchase their own container, or we could try to negotiate a deal with whatever the hauler is. Like I know myself, I use Casella, they charge me $5 a month for my container as a rental fee. So I think that's all part of what we have to work out in the detail of the RFP planning, how we're going to do that.
The other thing is that Kim mentioned it earlier, is that there needs to be a lot more education out there about recycling, because there's, not the numbers that we should be seeing using this program. And everybody's paying for it, and we need to have a lot more education about what is and is not acceptable.
It really is the topic of the day in this whole region, because everybody's kind of dealing with Casella as the most capable and scale hauler of both garbage and recycling. Lebanon has just begun their year or two study of their own facility. Just like we are doing and wrapping up in Hartford, they're going to evaluate their transfer station and their recycling program going forward. It seems pretty obvious that just as the fossil fuel industry was selling us on gasoline and no environmental impacts, we were sold a line of talk in the 70s about plastic and how it's the wonderful new material that's going to be endlessly recyclable. And we're finding that so much of the plastic is not being recycled. Then you have this whole debate within the debate about zero sort recycling versus sorted recycling. At the transfer station, we ask that recycling is sorted, and it's a much cleaner, purer product for eventual sale. However, when you do the zero sort, which is more convenient for people, there's a lot of waste associated with it because you've got pizza dripping on plastic, dripping on cardboard. And so there's a lot of waste that ends up in the landfill. So there's an awful lot of discussion going on in the Upper Valley about all these issues. But for now, what we're feeling is the pressure from Casella to basically subsidize the modernization of their fleet. And that's just becoming a much more expensive program that we're involved with than we used to be.
But there again, I mean, we always focus on Casella.
Yeah.
We have to think outside the box,
Yeah.
And especially with this, because we have so many other smaller people in the Upper Valley that do trash hauling.
Mhm.
And we could split up the town of Hartford into different districts for recycling.
Right.
But I just hate to think of the big guy on the block saying, I've got the biggest stick and you're gonna do it my way.
Well, that's right. And that's why we were only willing to come at them with another 6 months, because we did not want to lock ourselves into a longer term relationship.
Thank you.
Jim?
As much as we appreciate their service over the years.
Couple things. One, so there's going to be an RFP. I mean, we'll see the facility feasibility study, so that's going to inform whatever happens with the RFP anyway. But I mean, I had proposed this when we discussed this before, that could the smaller haulers form a co-op to basically have a contract to do that. But, and maybe when you say districts, like that could be a possibility in terms of opening it up to, the villages, which are not actual, the villages are conceptual boundaries, but basically we could create districts to some extent, probably. Anyway, I guess I'm just saying, if there is a way that the smaller companies could competitively bid on this service, that would be amazing. But I guess another question with that would be, or not even a question, that was more of a comment, but a question would be, is there any world in which, like, what's the likely number of years that Casella would require a contract for? Like, they won't do just a 1-year contract, right?
We've heard of like 5 years.
Because I kind of tossed out the idea of seeing, like, in conjunction with more publicity around the availability of recycling. I mean, having the cost of curbside recycling be decided by like local option tax, to me is an interesting concept to consider in the whole thing, just because, but still, if we're paying for over 5,000 users and 1,800 are using it, we're still paying for more than.
And we're also competing with ourselves. We're
Yeah.
hiring a contractor to compete with our transfer station.
True, if the transfer station, if there's feasibility there for the facility to continue functioning as a transfer station. So that is part of the equation. And there's Act 148, which basically requires trash haulers to
Gravel
remove,
service, yeah.
so anyone that is not taking their physical solid waste trash to a facility, if they're paying to have it picked up, that hauler is required by law to pick up their recycling as well. I mean, there's a lot of room for, yeah, I'll be interested to see what we come up with. And so that, when do we expect the feasibility?
Our last conversation, we would probably have that, like, said, by, after the holidays.
Oh, I
Early
thought we were gonna have it in
January,
November.
So,
Okay. Because if we do want any question about this service on the March ballot, obviously we would
we
need
have to have
that.
it by, yeah.
We would need it before, after the holidays.
Mhm.
when is the printing gotta go out for?
I think the actual, if you're talking about the warning and all that, I think we're talking about January 17th, 18th, 19th, something like
Yeah,
that.
you gotta do
We
your
really
articles
gotta
by-
push this thing then to get a.
Yeah, I
Any more
mean,
questions on this extension?
oh, no, let's do that. And there is a new.
Is there a new motion or?
I did add a new motion, if that's okay.
Yeah, I'm
I
happy
did
to
it. So,
make
Are
that.
there any more questions on this for Brian? All good? Okay.
Just like. Yeah, because extension gets us to the end of this fiscal year.
Yes.
So whether it's for the 26 budget or,
We've had that discussion.
yeah, I mean, we have to know a plan, we have to come up with a plan prior.
My proposal to Brian was, let's include ongoing recycling in the budget, but and maybe Gail's not here, but she maybe slapped me for saying it. But when we set the tax rates, we can raise less money than would have been required under the budget if we've decided between March and July to pull the plug on that program. Simply not fun to that extent. So instead of raising $22 million in taxes, you raise 21,700,000 instead. And simply
and I
pull
did,
the plug on the program.
and I did in my proposed budget for this, I did raise it by another $50,000 to $325,000.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and what's the cost of this extension? This is
30.
Where is the
302.
motion for this?
It came in the packet today, along with several questions.
It's a 2-page memo, so it's on the second page.
So what's that?
It was a 2-page memo, so I did revise it to add a motion.
Came in an email to the select board from me
So-
earlier today
So,
as one of the attachments to questions and answers from Kim Souza.
Okey dokey, that. I guess, Kim, if you have that,
Yeah, I
Any more
do.
questions, or I'll take a motion if anyone wants to make one.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I move that the select board or the town, I move that the
Town of Hartford, I would
Hartford
think.
enter into a 6-month extension for a period of January 1st to June 30th, 2025 with Casella Waste Services, Inc. for the collection of curbside recycling and for the collection and transportation of solid waste and recyclable materials at the transfer station. And to authorize the town manager to sign the 6-month agreement with Casella Waste Services, Inc. Dated, this says November 5th, but I'm gonna say November 12th.
no, November 5th, it's actually.
Oh, it is,
the
okay,
agreement
dated
there.
November 5th, 2024.
The motion, do we have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Second for Mary, discussion.
Keep pushing the sandboard head.
Mhm.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Well, let's see if we can get through the next 2 PPW items, then we could take our 5-minute break.
Okay, and just by the way, I'm getting email that people are having a hard time hearing, so I'll speak up more.
Okay.
Thank you, Kim.
I don't know, are these
So-
microphones working or is it that? These?
Hey, Nick,
I was thinking these
is the owl the only audio or do these microphones work?
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you.
Brian, number 2, heating fuel.
So, yep, number 2 is number 2 heating fuel. So within there, we actually went through a little history on this. Back in 22 is the last time we did an RFP. What had happened is that Dead River had it back then too, but it was for like 41,000 gallons of heating fuel. We had a mild winter. We didn't use all of it up. So per the agreement, we were locked into it. So last year, we still had approximately 19,000 gallons of heating fuel left over that we had to do. If we didn't do it that way, we'd have liquefied damages that we'd had to pay Dead River. So this year we went out, who's using it, who's not. That's where we came up with a different number, about 29,000 gallons of fuel. So we put it out, followed that, and the only respondent that we got back was Dead River for this. So the good news is that there's a price reduction of approximately $1.04 per gallon. So to go into what it's going to cost budgetary wise, Kim, we don't, each department budgets their own for what they need. So I don't have that, what they actually budgeted for it, but I would assume if they use the $3.86 from prior years compared to where we're at now, there should be more than enough money in everybody's budget for this year to fund it.
Questions, Kim?
Although the one of them that I don't know which one was it. I think it was the Bugby Center I was looking at. They actually their budget came in less, like if you multiplied the number of gallons in their narrative by the 2.1818 or 818. But if there's an attachment in the contract that has these like delivery locations. So if I look at those departments, it should show me like, so it's the Bugby Center, Department of Public Works, the Hartford Village Library, Public Safety Building. So like those are, that is all that
It's a
encompasses this
usage,
contract.
right? That's based off of the usage of what we had historically. Kim went through it and tried to get how much exactly from going through prior bills, looking what the facilities used for that. So
And as to whether each of these department heads have factored the savings into their budgets, I don't know, but it'd probably be a good question for them as they come forward.
Yeah, we can look at that. Okay, thanks.
you know, a lot depends on the winter too. I mean,
So
we had
these-
another mild winter last year too, so you didn't use as much.
Brian, these numbers you gave us, they're for entire town usage of heating oil?
Mhm.
Why are we seeing all the heating oil under DPW versus individual
It's not,
budgets?
we just put the RFP out, Lenny. That's all.
Right,
It's their budget pays for it.
does DPW budget pay for heating oil for all buildings?
No.
Okay, so this is just the RFP for the bid.
Correct.
You put it, okay.
Correct.
They're kind of the conduit for the
All right,
town.
in every building, okay.
Just like we do for gas and diesel. We don't use it all up, but we put the RFP out for that too. So.
Right. Okay.
Just to clarify on that, so like the buildings that are part of the enterprise funds, are those going in the DPW highway?
No.
Fund 10? No, so it's just, so those are in their budgets.
Correct.
Paid for in this, so this is, this whole amount isn't all coming out of the general fund?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Correct.
That's helpful.
I'll make a motion if nobody's got any other questions.
Any other questions? And then I will take a motion. Okay, Lenny?
Okay, make a motion, we award the bid to Dead River Company of Woodstock, Vermont for an estimated 29,950 gallons of number 2 heating fuel at a price of $2.8181 per gallon, and authorize the town manager to sign an agreement with Dead River Company for the period of November 1st, 2024 to June 30th, 2025.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second. Go ahead, Ida.
I'll second.
From Ida.
And just quick discussion.
Yeah, do you discuss?
This, I think this came up last year. The language in the contract says for a 1-year period of from November 1 to June 30th, which is not 1 year. So
Okay.
just maybe consider.
Heating season.
Heating season,
I
yeah,
know, yeah.
heating year.
Is that our contract or do
didn't-
they generate?
They generate.
Yeah,
It's
They always go,
Okay, we have
heating
a
companies always go
motion
heating season.
and a second. More discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, now we'll hit this next item and then take our short break. Chris or Brian, I will turn this over to you. This is for Nutt Lane.
All right, I guess I'll take over. I was hoping not to be back here on this one, but the fear came true. The contractor did pull out of the project. So we do want to move forward and award the contract to the second lowest bidder, who we had to calm down. He's ready to go as far as contract goes, and told him hold off, not pull his bonds and insurance yet till you guys approve it. But there is an increased impact on the ARPA funding, so we're asking to restore the necessary amount of ARPA funding to cover the additional expense of his contract.
So it's a
Essentially,
$35,000 difference, is that right?
it is a $35,000 difference. It's a little bit different, and I'm gonna have to ask Gail, due to the auditors being in town, she wasn't fully available for this, but it's roughly 35,000. Some of the final bills that we didn't know at the time for the first phase of OCE hadn't come in yet, and the contract for them hadn't been produced yet. The contract was 1,000 less. The last bill was a little different. So right now I've got it projected at just under 33,000, but it'll definitely be under 35,000. So
I did ask Gail earlier on if it's as simple as having the select board approve this proposal, thereby giving authority to her to move $35,000 from ARPA funds to the project. And she said, well, she's not 100% sure, but if there's a further motion that might be needed to take money out of its designated location, remember we put it all into the unassigned fund, that we can easily do that with a follow-up document at our next meeting, for example. So the question really is, I asked her was, is the motion proposed by DPW sufficient authority for the select board to authorize additional ARPA funds toward this project since it's more expensive? And she gave a qualified yes, but that if anything else is needed, we can follow up with paperwork to get it done.
Questions? Then,
So I'm confused on something. Knott's Excavating came in at the lowest bidder. Right?
Zulazny.
yeah, so Lasney.
What's that?
They were 270,000.
Not.
No, the
Zulazny was.
Okay, so you're saying the next bidder is Knott's then? That's,
it's Isaac's.
It's
Isaac's number 4.
at 305,000.
okay. Do we have any experience with these folks?
They did yeah, we had great experience with them. They did the Gate Street extension or Fairview extension down to Gate Street water main
Okay.
project last summer, and they were organized. It went right on schedule almost to the day. So it was,
So when we put out an RFP and somebody comes back and with a number and they're not locked into that until we ratify it as a board? Is that correct? And how do these people walk away from this? I guess I'm
More-
Someone else that wants.
It's more nuanced than that.
it's a little, yeah, exactly. So you award a contract subject to them attaining all their bonds and permissions. Basically, if they can't come forward and meet all those requirements to execute the contract, then basically the contract doesn't get executed. Are there ways we could go after their bid bond? Their bid bond's only $5,000. We discussed it internally quite extensively. It could cost us more than $5,000 in years to collect the $5,000 and give us a bad reputation amongst contractors when we're trying to attract contractors. So whether they messed up on their bid amount or they just decide, you know what, I'm not going to do it if it's not going to happen this fall. I don't know. All I know is that time is of value to us, reputation is of value to us. This puts us right back closer to the budget we originally estimated in, and we have more faith in this estimate anyway, but due to federal rules and bidding rules, we had no reason not to accept the lowest bid.
So is Isaac's gonna be able to accomplish this year?
No, they are going to do it next year.
Okay. So by when
We'll have an agreement in place.
We're gonna have the agreement in place per ARPA funding rules.
Right.
And they're gonna have a completion date of basically the end of next summer, next fall, rather.
Okay, all right. Good.
No questions for Brian or Chris?
It's a good question, Lenny. We had a judgment call we made.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to understand.
Yep.
Everything about it, so, all
Let's
right,
take a motion if there's no other questions. Okay,
make a motion that we authorize the town manager to award and execute a contract with Isaac's Excavating Incorporated for $305,000 utilizing ARPA funds for the Nutt Lane Water Main Improvement Project and to utilize up to $61,000 of Hartford water reserves for a 20% contingency fund to cover unforeseen issues related to the project.
okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second from Kim. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thanks, guys. We'll take 5 and then come back to discuss ordinance digitization proposals and the rest of our business.
There's an extra one if you want to keep one for you.
Hey, looks like we're all back from break. So we're gonna talk about digitizing the town ordinances. We've got Dylan here. Prepared a memo for us. So maybe Dylan or John, I'll turn it over to you two and take it away.
Yes, Dylan is certainly here, having talked with the board and me several times in the past about policy and ordinance digitization for easy access and searchability on the town's website. Dylan's done a fine bit of research and history in his memo, so I'll let you speak for yourself, Dylan.
Thank you. As mentioned, for the folks who've been on the board for a while, this presentation will look pretty familiar, but for the new folks, I've did the best I could from a historical standpoint. This process predates me, but I've spoken with enough folks who have been around. So I feel like I have a decent idea on the procedure. Definitely not an expert on the actual ordinances per se, but I feel like I have a pretty good idea of how we got to where we are and, some potential paths forward, if you will. As stated, just sort of my goal is to bring all the information to the board so they kind of understand the full spectrum of kind of how we're at where we're at today. And, my understanding, obviously, with, especially with the town's communications manager coming on, that we're trying to, lean heavier on the transparency side of things, public accessibility to public documents, things of that nature. So the bottom portion is a little bit of speculation based on what I know, but from what I understand, the town had contracted with General Code, which is one of the biggest, ordinance codifiers in the area. They're very big in New England. Around 2008, 2009. And then there was a period of about 7 years that multiple ordinances were passed. And from what I can gather at the time when I started in 2017, there was some confusion over the cost to codify 7 years worth of documents versus the yearly cost. And so because of that, the town at the time elected not to continue with that vendor. And so since then, all of our documents have been kind of brought offline, if you will. So currently they're being kept in the town clerk's office. And so when ordinances are passed, they are sort of brought and stapled, photocopied, various other methods to get into the book. And there's really no, there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen, let's say. And so there's a lot of different methods and there's no sort of overarching procedure. So the document as a whole, the police section could look very different than the Parks and Recreation section. And so similar to the website, the idea is that there should be sort of a one voice for the town, and it should be sort of a streamlined procedure of how to kind of get everything into this one living, breathing document. So to kind of touch on some of the options that we have, General Code is the people who are familiar with our code. I've spoken to them. The original folks who did the code are still there. They, as you can see, they've done it for 60 plus years. They have a lot of local folks in the area, Rutland, Burlington, Lebanon. Civic Plus has another option, which I'll touch on in a second. There are some similarities and subtle differences in how they do things. They also touch on, both vendors touch on policies, which I know has been a big topic of conversation. How do we list our policies? Where do we put them? What is the procedure in which to do that? I think it's important to realize that ordinances and policies from a legal standpoint and website standpoint are two very different things and should be kind of treated as such. But thankfully, both of these options for our ordinances have potential avenues for policies. So once everyone weighs in on kind of where we want them to live, depending on which direction we go, there are definitely some options out there for kind of everything that we're looking to accomplish. General Code has the lowest yearly fee, which they are going to, if we decide to go with them, they would waive the first year fee because there is a similar, as I mentioned in the beginning, a project fee for them to get everything online and codified. One of the biggest differences between the two is general code charges time and effort for ongoing supplementation of ordinances, while Civic Plus has a built-in rate for however many that we have. So from what I gather, we don't have that many ordinances that we pass. It's maybe more policies, which are, for lack of a better phrase, kind of free for, our website hosting capabilities. And the general code, as I mentioned, you'll see there's a screenshot here from Rutland on the left-hand side. They call it public documents. And as you look at Rutland versus Lebanon, it's kind of up to the town, or definitely not general code as to what the town calls a public document. Here, they have agendas, staff reports, minutes, policies. I think there was another one that had declarations. So depending on, what counts as public and what does not, it's kind of up to the town. As mentioned, Civic Plus, they've been buying a lot of companies. So obviously the advantage to them is it's sort of a single pane of glass, if you will, one vendor for multiple things. They have a company called MuniCode. The public documents version of what I just showed you is called MuniDocs. It's similar to Google Drive, if you will, and you'll see a screenshot of that. It's about $400, I believe, in the last slide, but it's 25 gigs is the base price or the base size limit. And for folks who know gigabytes, that's a lot of documents, like hundreds of thousands, depending on the size. So the biggest thing I would say is figuring out, is $1,600 a year for theoretically unlimited ordinance passing? Is that worth it? Are we planning on passing a ton of ordinances or redoing a bunch of them in the future? I don't obviously know the answer to that. And their hosting fee is slightly higher. They are waiving the project cost, which is obviously a big difference. So you'll see the last slide, there's a few $1,000s for general code to get everything up on the website. Civic Plus is waiving that fee. And then probably the biggest difference is Civic Plus, obviously owning MuniCode, integrates directly into the website. So if you were to go to the website, search for, dog leash ordinance, it would show up within the website. General code is an external hosted site that we would hyperlink to, also searchable, but you would have to click the extra step. So similar to on the left-hand side, this is like a partial screenshot here, but similar to how you would search for agendas or meeting minutes or anything of that nature, it would show up as just another option. And this is kind of what their interface looks like. You get kind of a history of, previous versions of the ordinance and, things that are in the process of being codified. So both options, obviously, I think angle heavily towards our transparency goals, no matter which option you kind of go with. This is, again, definitely not my area of expertise, but this is my gathering of what has been passed since the original document has been done. It is slightly outdated because I do believe there is a fire department ordinance that has been passed since I last gave this discussion. But that's a rough idea of, how they're basing pricing going forward. This is kind of hopefully a good summation of everything. Like I said, slight differences. MuniCode is suggesting a legal review, partially because they didn't do our code the first time, and it's hard for them to vouch for code they didn't codify. General code, as I said the two staff members from them who did the code originally are still there, so they feel confident, and they are kind of in the camp of, don't do a legal review until you figure out, perhaps you have more ordinances that aren't codified yet, or, kind of get it up on the website first and then maybe decide later on. And I guess there's I don't know if it's every 10 years or so, but there's a certain metric that they suggest for, when to potentially do that. So as I stated, $7,900 project cost for general code. They're waiving the first year fee versus Muni code. They are charging the first year fee, but they aren't charging to get things back on the website. Slight timetable on the bottom estimated on what we have to do. So last slide here. They both are suggesting not to put the personnel policy as part of the ordinances and instead listed as a public policy. As I mentioned, Muni code has Muni docs, general code has the public documents module. Again, something for someone other than myself to decide. And then if, for example, if we weren't going to go with Muni code and we were having to try and budget for ordinances, the suggestion is to perhaps have a modest line item in a budget if we're anticipating, maybe a big overhaul in the future or various other things. So I think that is about it. Happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Bill? Mary?
This is gonna sound a little bit simplistic, but does this mean that we didn't have any available codes? You've got the original 2007, 2008 code book.
So
Were there no codes before that, or were they just redone?
I'm sure there was, as far as I know, the sort of official codifying was in 2007, which is when we first started working with this company that, like I said, has been codifying for a very long time. But in terms of the state of things before 2007, I'd have to defer to folks who have been here.
Okay, so all of these pages would be needed to be added to that, including the 100+ from zoning.
Exactly. And the zoning one, I think, was by far the biggest one. So
Right.
that's how they've kind of estimated the project cost. And like I said, the fire department one that was added, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think was very big in size. I think it was.
With the dilapidated building
Yeah,
ordinance.
yeah.
That was the one where no number had been assigned to it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, because it seems like the only updated one besides maybe that is the signs one in 2023. Okay.
I just have a couple questions. One is like, is there room are we in like a position to negotiate? So for example, to say like, come back to the Municode option and say like, well, our other, vendor offered to waive the first year. Would you be willing to do something like that? And then my other question is like, for the legal review, they're recommending it, but that suggests it's not required. And if we're,
Presumably, you would think that when the town enacts an ordinance,
yeah,
it's been vetted from a legal standpoint. So I'm not sure really what that adds for us.
right. So, yeah, so I guess that would knock off quite a bit. And if we were comfortable as a board, I just was curious if that's like an option that we could propose. Yeah.
Absolutely. From a, depending if you talk to general code, they would say definitely not necessary. And again, they're kind of down the middle and not really trying to tell me why the other folks are recommending it. But one opinion is sort of, like I said, they didn't do the code originally. So they're essentially trying to find a way to vouch for it. But as I mentioned to them that the other vendor is not recommending it, they wanted to give me that number as sort of if that was the avenue we wanted to go down. That's sort of what we're looking at. And as far as trying to negotiate, I can certainly ask about waiving the first year fee. I feel like they will probably tell me that they don't feel comfortable, similar to how they don't care necessarily about the legal review versus Muni code. I think they would come back and say they need to charge upfront, and in return they would waive the hosting fee for the first year.
Questions? Ben?
Yes, I just wanted to make sure I understand that because our current book of ordinances is a physical book with things stapled and scotch taped in, that sort of thing, I just want to make sure that both of these options are going to feature someone from these companies like actually looking through the physical book that is the current hard copy, the definitive record, and making sure that everything that's in that definitive record ends up online.
So I have a digital version of that book. I think it's I've made it clear that it's probably 95% accurate, that I've given to Muni Code. They're based in Florida. The rep for General Code is in the New Hampshire area. And so he's been here and I've shown it to him. And that's how those slides that have all the ordinances I've listed, that's how he came up with that, because he was able to compare what we have versus the original. And if we were to go down this road, we would print out new books. So for the folks who like to come in and physically look at it, there is that option, but it would be fully searchable online for folks who like to do that.
And to be clear, both of these companies are saying we will have someone read through that book physically.
I think for Muni Code, we perhaps would have to scan it and send it to them. I don't know if they would fly up here, but the rep from General Code has offered to come to meetings. You know, we wanted to keep it vendor neutral, at least for the first conversation, but he is very willing to come for anything needed.
Yeah, whenever I see something like this, I see that the Civics Plus is a little more straightforward than the General Code as far as user access. So that brings to mind cybersecurity. When you have to go outside, is there any concern with either one of these vendors as far as cybersecurity?
I obviously don't know every in and out of how they operate, but I believe General Code is in a AWS, Amazon Web Services environment. So they are very compliant with a lot of the major ones. I would also say that because of everything that we're essentially giving them would be public information anyway. It wouldn't be proprietary or, confidential type of stuff. So I would point to, again, the website integration is obviously a big piece if we really care about, I know Lebanon, paraphrasing my conversation with the communications person, I know Lebanon really makes their website the central hub for anything and all information. They really don't do a lot of listserv conversations. They really point everybody to the website. So if website integration to what I think you're speaking to is the most important thing, we want the ordinances to be integrated into the website. There really is, they're the only choice in that regard. But I would point to Rutland and Lebanon, New Hampshire, and I think they're doing South Burlington, Shelburne. They really have General Code has a big footprint in New England specifically. So
relationship. with the town.
exactly. And the folks they told me the two folks who did the code here there are barred attorneys and they've been doing it for 35 years. So it's kind of the two schools of thought, one being single pane of glass with Civic Plus, one vendor versus General Code, that this is what they do for 65 plus years.
So security should be fairly well. Okay. So the other question I guess I had with this is that this is going to be read-only documents for the town or for anyone within the town of Hartford. Who has right authority with this to be able to update them after they've all been entered? There's got to be somebody within the town that has ability to write to this file to update this. Who is that?
Maybe that's our next policy. How
who
will
is
the town maintain the ordinances going
who
forward?
will be responsible for that integration of new policies?
So I can add to that the suggestion is to have it, from what I was told, I'm not suggesting this myself, but the suggestion is once the select board passes the ordinance with whatever policy you guys have, it would go to someone like the town clerk, obviously John or whoever we deem necessary. And that way the vendor has a specific list of folks who are authorized to send in ordinances. And in terms of if we were to go this route, we wouldn't be editing the document. That's what the company is for. So we would merely, the authorized person would hand the past ordinance over and then they would take it and start to codify it into the document to have sort of the single voice from the town. And it wouldn't be very obvious that there are multiple people kind of editing the same documents.
Either platform is searchable.
Yes.
So when somebody goes to these sites and they pull up an ordinance, is it gonna appear as a PDF document? Or is it gonna say this is, the dates and times? I mean, what are they gonna see? Are both sites, you're gonna see the same thing, or it's like,
You'll see the same thing in the sense that it's one living, breathing, searchable document that you can expand. The interface obviously is different because it's two separate companies. And there's little add-on things on every one. So if you care about seeing the document or the ordinance as immediately once it's received by someone like Civic Plus, you can pay a small extra to see sort of, okay, the document's been received. This is the document that's being codified. This is the ordinance that's being updated. And then you'll start to see, as we make changes, you'll see a history of, this is the ordinance from 2015. This is the 2012 version. Right now, there's really no, we're doing our best to keep it in the one big booklet, but as time goes on, it's going to be harder to kind of keep
my
that.
biggest problem with the searchability now is there's no rhyme or reason to what you get. There, you look, you look for something and you can't find the current version without diving through many, many holes. And it's very discouraging.
And there's
Makes you
two
wanna
sides
give
of
up.
this too, where, like I said, the ordinances are its own thing, but then it comes with, either option comes with possibilities to really update our policies and push. It'll take collaboration with department heads because we have to figure out who has these documents, and obviously certain departments have internal policies that are not for public, and others are public. So it'll give us a platform to house policies, declarations, whatever we want the public to really,
With that said, though, you just brought up another good question. There are internal policies, all right? Our select board members going to have access to those internal policies. There's certain level of, policies that we should have, or whoever's sitting at this desk should be able to have access to that general public should not. I mean, is there going to be some sort of a password login thing to be able to access those, or?
I would say, I can't answer that, but I would say in terms of the password nature, this solution is not really meant for internal policies. If we were going to decide on access to anything not public, it would not live on kind of a public facing solution.
Okay, so how does, so there would be a separate entity for select board members to access things.
We would just ask for, get a piece of paper or something.
Okay.
Can you just stop sharing your screen?
Absolutely.
I know what it's like to watch these on Zoom.
Further questions or comments? Bill, Kim?
So I know, like, you're not giving a specific recommendation per se. I definitely find pros and cons for both. Like, I really like that single pane of glass, and like to be able for members of the public to just go on the website and search for something without having to go find where the ordinances are. Anyway, but also I do like the idea of, having a human resource
Who already knows our ordinances.
knows our ordinance, but and like when thinking about the I mean, they've been doing it for 35 years, who knows how much longer they're going to be doing it. But one question I have is, so if you talk about having to just scan the book and send it to Civic Plus, is what I'm looking at on the Cherokee County, Georgia, like the samples you sent, they look very nice. They're not necessarily consistent in format, but they don't look like, a piece of paper that was squished out of a book and scanned on a screen.
Yep.
Do you know what the actual aesthetic could be like if we're working with Civic Plus?
It wouldn't be, the nature of how we're kept now. That wouldn't be evident once it's live, if that's kind of what you're saying. There are a lot of examples I can show you. I used to have them in an old email, but I have there's live examples from different towns. A lot of them are in Florida, where you could click around and see kind of how it looks. I would say the format, the interface is similar the more Civic Plus customers you click around. To your point, it's just a question of, do we want to, similar to Lebanon, make the website the central hub for any and everything? Or if it would be, the general code would simply just be a hyperlink. So it would say, you know, click here essentially, but.
I mean, even like the charter on the town website is one of those like slanted scanned documents that
Yeah.
is, and still not searchable, but like it would be amazing if there were just like that professional presentation of these are documents that are embedded, that they are digital documents. I mean, anyway, so you're saying that it would look like that. It won't look like slanted
No,
piece of
no,
paper.
absolutely not. No.
Great, because I'm just imagining you like at the scanner with the green book or
Yeah.
someone. I mean, it's kind of how when we started this conversation, and ultimately, yeah, you know, wanting digital access to policies and ordinances is definitely, I think, something that has been expressed as a priority for a while. And the legal review, I feel like that could be another step another time, because also like one of H. Corey's longstanding recommendations has been to review the town's policies through a lens of equity, which was not possible until they became just accessible to begin with.
Yep.
And so that might be, you know, there might be a project down the road where there is a consultant hired to do both a legal review and an equity review of our, you know, historical ordinances and policies, and that, you know, the legal compliance of them, state laws and federal laws change, as we know and experienced with the Welcoming Hartford ordinance. Like, you know, the legal review of that has a mixed bag, and who knows, maybe there's some older ones with, you know, especially with in looking at ADA stuff, you know, there might be old ordinances that are really do need some updating, regardless of how familiar general code is with our ordinances. So I guess that's a long way to say when and how can we make a commitment on this? It is something right now we only have funded $5,000
In the
in
current
fiscal
budget.
25.
We
And
budgeted or tentatively budgeted 10 for this coming year.
yeah,
Maybe the 5,000 can be carried over to a combined 15, and then going forward, I think the annual maintenance is not that bad.
yeah.
So
I mean, if that were the case, I would propose that we do fund it for fiscal 26, encumber fiscal 25, and my personal preference is Civic Plus.
My biggest takeaway from this discussion is ease of user access is key to me. But the other thing is that when we do this, we still have to have a way for people that are not computer literate or don't own a computer to be able to come into town hall, have access to documents. So as it is now, I don't know where someone would go to say, I would love to get a copy of this. That's something that needs
you'd
to,
ask to see Lisa's big green book.
I've gone.
so
into
Lisa
the-
is the purveyor of everything. Okay.
She's the custodian.
But to me, like I say, the biggest thing is the easier, not so much, I don't care as much about the look. I do really care about ease of user access.
And either option would have multiple new books printed and updated with the same information you'd have online.
Yeah, I think I'm with Kim then and doing meeting smart on the Civic Plus, and I'm agreeable to that.
I guess I just wanted to, with this talk of scans and PDFs, I wanted to ask whether both of these options from a public or a user standpoint, these ordinances would be displayed as text, correct? Not displayed as searchable PDFs.
Well, they're both options would be searchable. So if you were to open the town ordinances online and search for dog leash ordinance, it would jump to that section rather than you having to scroll page after page, essentially.
Right. Right. I guess my question is, do you know whether both of them are going to display as text? Do you know what I guess it's hard to describe this from a layman's point of view, but you know, a text document that you could highlight. Obviously, you're not going to edit as a member of the public, but not displayed in like the format of 8.5 by 11 pages. Rather, you know, let's say one long scrollable text.
I don't believe it's one long scrollable text. I think both options would give you maybe the ordinance titles as the first option, and then you can obviously scroll through that and click one to expand it. Or you would, again, like I said, search and it would jump multiple ones. It wouldn't be every single word kind of in one big long document, if that makes sense.
So I'm seeing here on Kim's screen, and this is obviously it's breaking it down into subsections and it's all searchable, but it is displaying as like 8.5 by 11 pages. So at least one of the two options does this, it looks like.
As opposed to just not having those breaks there. I don't understand what the.
Yeah, and that may not be an issue if it's all turned into text within the company and then reformatted into a book and printed, and then the PDFs you're seeing are these newly formatted pages of this new book. That's fine. It looks nice and professional, but I just didn't want to see PDFs of scans of the current book.
No, it wouldn't be. It would be kind of their own, like, I guess, ecosystem, if you will. It wouldn't be just merely like if we sent them the book, they wouldn't scan it as big PDF and just kind of put it on the site. It would be kind of its own ecosystem, depending on
Digitize the text.
Exactly. And
Yeah, I think yeah, just given some of the questions that we're hearing, I think it would be super helpful if the board could see like concrete examples of existing. Yeah, so Kim, looks like you found some, but I mean, maybe you could work with John to just send us like, these are 3 examples that are operated by Civic Plus, and these are 3 examples operated by General Code. Just I think because the visuals and the way it operates is important to everybody, accessibility and aesthetics. Yeah, so I
Dylan
appreciate
did
that.
provide a couple of.
Oh, did he?
Just 2 examples, so I'm
Okay.
sure we could find other ones too, but in the response to my questions for tonight's meeting, there were a bunch of attachments. One of them was the response from Dylan, including an example of a random town he found that uses MuniDocs, MuniCodes version of this, and then another one, and as well as that Rutland uses it in Lebanon, and the one he sent for it was Rutland, but also Lebanon. And anyway, so there are some.
Okay.
So when I just to test this out, like our current site, it took me, I go into the town's website and I search and I put in town charter, okay? And that's 1 click, and then I do 2 searches. I guess what I'm getting at is, how many clicks is it gonna take for someone to get to something in either one of them? Is it gonna be a faster searchable thing than?
it'd be 1 click for a general code to click the hyperlink, and then you search, and then you would, if it was on Civics Plus end, you would just search for whatever you want in the website search button, and it would let you it's usually, from my experience, pretty smart in realizing if you're looking for an ordinance, but you can filter it if it's integrated, so you could tell it, this is an agenda I'm looking for, this is an ordinance, and it would be included.
It took me 4 clicks to get to the charter. So yeah, that's why I've got to be a little bit, I think would be nice to have it more streamlined than that. Pretty important document. So how do we make this an emotion as far as which one we want?
For me, I'd like to make a comment question too, before we take any other steps. And, I think this is a project that's important to the board. Looking at this stuff here, like I do kind of think I like the Unicode one. I think that's what Kim mentioned. I would also prefer it if we could make a motion on the funding and the actual vendor at the next meeting, as opposed to right now.
Yeah, can you come back with a proposed?
it's already in there, the digitization, right? Is that in the IT budget or in town manager's budget?
Town managers, I believe.
Cannot, yeah, so that can be written into it, so, well, you haven't got a dollar amount assigned to that yet, though,
No, I
right?
mean, we just had 10,000 for the coming year, 5,000 in the current year.
I think I agree that it would be nice to have Dylan come back with a recommended motion for this.
So shall we wait on until the IT presentation?
That'd be fine, I think.
When is the IT presentation? I mean, it doesn't really matter. It's a-
Same one as Gale's, I forget. the-
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Lanny on that. It'd be nice to. I wouldn't mind sitting with this a little longer than. you know,
11/26.
I think everyone's in agreement that we should go forward, and some people may look at it again and say, hey, Muni code does look great, but general code's the local one and does all this stuff all throughout Vermont, New Hampshire. And I don't want us, working with, I prefer a local sort of vendor who's done this before. So I think we all want to do this. This is a great step forward, I think, for the town. Maybe we can just put it as an item on night we look up we do the IT budget.
Okay.
Everybody comfortable with that approach?
Kind of shaking your heads, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, do we even need to, because we don't,
It's
we have
prob-
RFPs from both. But are either of them over 20,000? No.
No.
So you don't need board approval
No,
necessarily.
but because you've expressed such interest, I think it's good to have your involvement, since this is gonna be
Yeah.
something you respond to the voters about. What
Yeah,
decisions
we
you
should
make,
own which
why you made
company
it.
does it, I
Sure, sure.
think,
As far as I'm concerned, it seems like 6 of 1 having.
Yeah,
doesn't
I know.
matter. They both have strengths and weaknesses,
Yeah.
and you'd be fine with either one.
Just one quick follow-up, since we've reverted back to Civic Plus, is there a consensus among staff, particularly IT, that we made the right decision and it's working well and okay?
Absolutely. I mean, especially, not to change topics, I have a new employee in my department, and obviously the communications person, and both have picked up the website incredibly quickly. So I do feel good about the internal resources from just general website development, but obviously the ordinances are kind of its own thing, but definitely a big fan of just the website of Civic Plus in general.
Great.
All right, thanks very much, Dylan.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you, John, for
Sure.
bringing this back up to our attention, and confident we can take a concrete step forward soon. Okay, so I've got a couple procedural things before our executive session. So commission reports. Kim, do you have any?
I do not. I want tomorrow.
Randy?
I don't.
Mary?
Sure. On November 4th, the Hartford Conservation Commission met. There was a guest speaker, Sarah Kelly, Dartmouth research scientist and geographer. She's studying the impacts of flooding with her students, first on the Black River and now on the White River. They look at and examine the flooding as it affects riparian life and have involved the Abenaki in their work. They have been meeting at the West Hartford Library and have become culvert crawlers on Tuesdays and Thursday afternoons, which will come to an end soon with the end of the term. They will turn over the data they are collecting first to the town and then to the state of Vermont. Other projects discussed during that meeting were finding seedlings to plant in the David Chang Conservation Area along the riverbank to hopefully provide both bank stabilization and shade, planting fruit and nut trees for the food forest at Clifford Park, applying tree tubes on the young hardwood tree saplings in the hurricane forest to keep them from being eaten by deer browse, and a reminder to people interested in being in the town forest of hunting and to wear vests, and ongoing work they are also working on with any bylaw revisions.
Thank you, Mary. Anything?
No.
Randy, anything?
I have nothing.
I don't have anything. Good, since we're on commission reports, we may want to bring up the question again of whether we assign Sue's committees.
What were they?
Parks and Rec.
Yeah, which you have Parks and Rec and
Revolving loan.
revolving loan fund. So let's just think about that. That's something procedurally we could just do at an upcoming meeting. If anyone has particular interest, maybe just make it known. Okay, so consent agenda. I will take a motion. Make one, Kim.
Mr. Chair, I move that the select board approve payroll ending on November 9, 2024, AP manifests of November 8th and November 12, 2024, the meeting minutes from October 29, 2024, and upcoming meetings, November 14 budget, November 19 budget meeting, and November 26, which I think is both regular and budget.
All right, we have a motion. We have a second.
I'll second the
We
motion.
have a second from Mary. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so now executive session. We have the motions to go into executive session. Always forget, do we vote separately on these or we do them in one?
It can be done as one if you'd like.
Okay, so if anyone wants to, any?
Mr. Chair, I move to find that there are legal matters involving the town of Hartford and premature general knowledge, public knowledge would clearly place the town and or persons at a substantial disadvantage. Additionally, I move that the select board go into executive session to discuss a pending legal matter in which the town is involved and attorney-client communications made for the purpose of arbitration and mediation as set forth in 1 VSA section 3133A1C.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Well, second.
We have a second from Ina. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, we are in executive session.
We can get some signatures here if you don't mind during that transition, so don't forget them later.
We'll take a motion to come out of executive session.
Mr. Chair, make a motion to come out of executive session.
We have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second.
At
All those-
9:14.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, I will now read a resolution. Resolution of the Select Board of the Town of Hartford. The undersigned being the members of the Select Board of the Town of Hartford, Town, a municipal corporation duly created and validly existing under and pursuant to the laws of the state of Vermont, hereby resolve as follows. Resolved that the town authorizes and ratifies the settlement of the following claim against the town. Kwame Banks, charging party versus Town of Hartford respondent. Vermont Attorney General, Public Protection Division file number 2023-03623, EEOC charge number 16K-2024-00002. Resolved, the town admits no liability and enters into the settlement for the sole purpose of avoiding protracted litigation and agrees to the terms of the agreement entitled Settlement Agreement and General Release executed on November 5th, 2024. Resolved, the town hereby authorizes town manager John Haverstock to execute on behalf of the town the settlement agreement and general release and any and all necessary and incidental documents required in connection with the above described settlement. In witness thereof, the undersigned have executed this resolution on the dates set forth below. I will take a motion to adopt the resolution. Mary?
I move that we adopt this resolution. I need to name any more.
I think that's probably
As
sufficient.
presented.
You can say as presented.
As presented.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second from Brandon. Okay, any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Okay, we've adopted the resolution. All right.
We'll
I
need
will-
signatures from everybody on that.
Yep, I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved at 9:16.
We have a second,
I'll second.
second from Ada. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned.
So you see if you can get the presentations for Thursday, so they can be emailed out.
We have them already.
Oh, we do, no,
Yep,
oh, we do, okay,
they came early on Thursday.
okay. The slideshows?
Yep.
We have